Good afternoon and welcome to the Robert A. Jones House for today's lecture, which is sponsored by the Rohatyn Center for International Affairs, the Project on Creativity and Innovation in the Liberal Arts, and the Department of Economics. It's a pleasure to welcome our guest here this afternoon. Earlier this week, the price of oil topped the mark of $100 a barrel, a record high. The American housing market is slumping. Financial markets are roiled by a credit crisis. A weakened job market rattles the American psyche, as do rising heating bills and the escalating price of gas at the pump. I can think of no better time to address the topic of economic challenges facing the United States. And today, we have as our guest someone who is uniquely positioned to talk about such concerns. Until a few months ago, Al Hubbard served as the assistant to President George W. Bush for economic policy and as director of the National Economic Council, the administration's coordinating body for policy matters affecting the various sectors of the nation's economy. In this role, he helped direct White House policy on numerous economic issues, including entitlement reform, energy security, climate change, and housing and trade investment policy. Inside the White House, he was known as an honest broker, a creative thinker, and a man blessed with the virtues of patience and a great sense of humor. You could be a college president. These are essential traits when your job is to work with numerous department and agency heads to coordinate and implement the economic policy objectives of the President of the United States. Al Hubbard arrived at the White House in January of 2005 with a vast array of experience in both the public and private sector. He owns and operates a number of businesses in his home state of Indiana, where he was honored as the Small Business Person of the Year in 1983. He has served as director of the Indianapolis-based E&A Industries, a corporation that acquires and manages manufacturing companies, as chairman of the Indiana State Chamber of Commerce, and as a trustee on the boards of a number of institutions, including the Park Tudor School and the Anthem Corporation. His recent tenure in the White House was not his first at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. From 1990 until 1992, he served as Deputy Chief of Staff to Vice President Dan Quayle and as the Executive Director of President's Council on Competitiveness. Al Hubbard holds a BA degree from Vanderbilt University and both a JD and MBA from Harvard. He and his wife, Kathy, who's here, welcome, are proud parents of 3 children, including Katie Hubbard, who's also here, a member of the Middlebury class of 2010. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's featured speaker, Al Hubbard, and the title of his talk is Economic Challenges Facing the U.S. Welcome, Al.
Thanks very much, Ron. Let's see if I can figure out how to turn this thing on here. There. Is that, can y'all hear me? My voice is usually so loud, people hear it anyway. But is it working? Okay. Great. Well, there's Ron in the back. Thank you, Ron. Thanks. Very kind introduction, and thanks for lunch today. We had a nice one-on-one lunch in the grill, and I got to hear about what it's like to be president of Middlebury. And I can tell you, y'all are indeed fortunate to have Ron as your president. He has obviously already accomplished a lot, and his vision is truly remarkable, and I'm sure he's going to get it accomplished. Let me also just mention how honored I am to be here today and appreciate the invitation. Allison Stinger, I'm not sure how you pronounce her last name. I apologize. She's not here, but she and I have communicated extensively, and she's been so kind to arrange this and invite me, and I very much appreciate this opportunity. I can't resist sharing with you a little story that happened last night. My wife, who is on the Board of Trustees of DePaul University in Greencastle, and they just picked a new president. He's a dean, currently a dean at Harvard, and will be taking over. DePaul and I told him I would be at Middlebury today, and he said, "Oh my goodness, that is the most beautiful campus in the whole world." And he said, "Have you seen their athletic facilities?" And I said, "Duh, yes, I go there every time I come to Middlebury and sneak in. Don't tell Ron." And he said, "Oh my goodness, what a great place." So I share that with you as someone who obviously he was educated at Notre Dame and Stanford and Harvard and serves at Harvard now and is on his way to DePaul. Enormous respect for this institution, and to you students and my Katie, please recognize how fortunate you are to be here and to have such a great place to study and live for 4 years. Today I want to talk about, as Ron mentioned, see if I can figure out how to work this, the challenges facing the, does this work like this? Y'all can hear me all right? The challenges facing the country and the economic challenges facing the country. And I list these 7, and I'm going to try to get through them by 5 o'clock where we can have 30 minutes of questions, answers, and hopefully some answers. And but you can ask me about anything you want to. If I don't feel comfortable answering it, I won't answer it. I learned that very early on. And I also learned early on, just a quick aside, you go on TV and all this stuff, and you do get questions you don't know the answer to. And the first time that happened, I kind of faked it. And I was told very clearly from then on, you never fake an answer. I mean, if you don't know the answer, you don't answer it. I mean, you just cannot afford to take a chance on saying the wrong thing because, as you know, the press will repeat it over and over and over and over again. So I'll remember that for the rest of my life. I would encourage you to adopt that as your practice as well. But anyways, you look here, you're probably thinking, Ron in his introduction talked about everything that's in the news right now, and one of the big items that's not up there that's in the news is the credit crunch on Wall Street. The subprime mortgages, the CDOs, the asset-backed securities, there are now these 7-day asset securities that are all hung up. And so we truly do have a credit crunch in the financial markets right now, and it's sort of, I think anyone would ask, well, why don't you have that listed? And I'll tell you why I don't have it listed, and I may be wrong about it. But I think that will be worked out in the next 6 months to a year. It was caused by the financial institutions getting overly aggressive in terms of their lending practices, overly aggressive in terms of their creative financial instruments, which no one understood, so people were buying things and they didn't know what the value was. And the good thing about America, and I trust that we will continue to operate this way, is when we make a mistake like this, we force institutions to be transparent, be honest, market to market, and deal with their problems, as opposed to what happens in other countries like Japan where they don't do that. And I think within the next 6 months to a year, this credit crisis or credit crunch will be behind us. Unfortunately, some people will suffer because of it, and that's unfortunate, but it's not a long-term problem. We have the best financial markets in the world, and I think we'll continue to have them. We just need to encourage our financial institutions to be a little more prudent in the way they operate, and I think we will be doing that. But these things happen. I hate to say it, but they do happen, and then the markets will deal with them, and they deal with them pretty severely, as you can see what's happened to the heads of Merrill Lynch and the heads of other major financial institutions that are no longer serving in those capacities. So let me go to this list. Let's see if I can work it. Entitlements. Y'all may know what entitlements are. My wife, dear wife, said you ought to explain what entitlements are, and they are a little different. And the Congress every year appropriates money that's being spent on highways or spent on research and development or on energy or various and sundry things. But entitlements are not appropriated every year. What happens is that Congress decided that for these big programs that they would designate a certain amount of benefit to certain individuals, and then we as taxpayers pay whatever that costs, and they don't appropriate it every year. So the result is, it can grow as much as it grows, and we have to cover the bill. And that's why it's such a big problem, is because we don't appropriate it every year. It's a promise we have made, and we have to fulfill it every year, and we don't know what the cost is going to be. Social Security is a retirement program for all Americans, working Americans, and it can start at 62. Medicaid is a health care program, theoretically, for the low income, although the majority of the money goes for nursing home care for the elderly. and theoretically the low-income elderly, but because you have an incentive, a lot of people will artificially make their mothers and fathers poor so they can get the taxpayer to pay for it. And then Medicare is health care for people who are 65 and over. And the bottom line is we are spending a lot more money than we ever anticipated, and it is a looming financial disaster. Let me go through it real quick. Social Security, a large financial hole. It's a $13 trillion unfunded liability that's growing at $700 billion a year. Why? It's the demographics. 1950, 16 people worked for every retiree. Today, 3 people work for every retiree. In 2050, 2 people will work for every retiree. And, the longer we wait to deal with this, the bigger the problem. This shows the problem. People like me, I'm 60. In 2 years, I can draw Social Security, and this is the big hump. And this is what's causing the problem. And there are not going to be enough of you working to pay for me. And so something has got to give. And unfortunately, Congress has refused to deal with it because it's not a crisis today. But let me give you another couple of statistics. I know I'm going to bore you all with all these statistics. Today, we pay Social Security taxes that are supposed to go to a Social Security fund. It's an $80 billion surplus today. And by the way, the money's not saved. It's spent on other government programs. By 2017, after I start retiring and all my buddies, there will no longer be a surplus. By 2033, it will be a $300 billion deficit every single year and continuing to grow. And that is the problem. And that's why when they ask people like you, are you more likely to see this was a true Gallup poll, if you're more likely to see a unidentified flying object or get your Social Security, most people say, who are your age, say, I'm more likely to see an unidentified flying object because we've got this huge problem. Medicare. Social Security is a $13 trillion problem. Unfunded liability. Medicare, $70 billion. Trillion, sorry, thank you. And growing at $2 trillion a year. It is totally unsustainable, and we have basically done nothing about it. This is a pretty graph that shows the problem. These are entitlements. And this is the amount of money that we raise every year. It's averaged about 18.4% since World War II. And as you can see, by 2030, 3/4 of it will go towards entitlements. And it keeps growing and growing and growing. And obviously, we're going to have to confront it someday. But the unfortunate thing is, as I mentioned before, Congress does not like to deal with problems unless they are forced to through a crisis. That's what happened in 1983 when we had the last Social Security Commission. It was a crisis. They literally didn't have money to pay the bills. That leads into health care. Medicare is a big problem because the costs of health care are going through the roof in addition to the demographic problem. And this is the fundamental cause of health care problems in America. This is all in today's dollars. Today's dollars. In 1988, it cost the average employer-provided family coverage cost $3,600. Today it costs $12,000. It's almost quadrupled in 20 years. Again, no inflation in there. And it's growing at 7 or 8% a year, non-sustainable basis. The American people are incredibly upset about it, and that's why it's going to be a major issue in this presidential campaign, and it should be a major issue in this presidential campaign. And it's one of these issues that the politicians have known that it needs to be dealt with, but they've never, ever dealt with it. And we are at a tipping point. Something has got to give. And the debate, this is going to be the debate. We can go one of two ways. We can go to a government, basically a single-payer system, which is what they have in Canada, they have in Great Britain, they have in France, they have in most developed countries. Problem with that is it's a system where prices are set by the government and care is rationed by the government. Because by the way, I apologize. I'm going to go back because I want to explain why we've had this escalation, because that's a very important point. Many people think that the escalating costs of health care are because of technology or demographics. But most economists would agree that the primary cause is because it's a third-party pay system. So when we consume health care, we consume it as if it were free. Think about the last time you went to the doctor or to the hospital. Did you ask what the price was? Did you shop? No, and none of us do. Or if we do, we're aberrational. Because we have this, most of us get our health care either through the government or through our employer. And the result is when we go to the doctor, it's already prepaid. We never ask the price. And the result is that we overutilize, and there's not the pressure of the normal market system to keep prices under control. Think about if your employer or the government or whomever, as opposed to providing health care, provided food care. So when you go to the supermarket, you have your employer-provided insurance card, and when you go to check out, you don't pay dollars. You just give them that card. They run it through their system, and you're checked out. You don't pay anything. So what would you do when you go to the food store? You'd buy caviar, you'd buy steaks, you'd buy only the best steaks, you'd buy fancy imported goods. You'd buy more than you need because who cares? We'll just throw it away. We're not paying for it anyway. Overutilization. Then what would happen? Employers would say, oh my goodness, my employees are using more of my food insurance than I thought they would. So then the employer would say, no, you can't buy steak anymore. You can only buy it once a month. You can only buy this amount. So they'd start rationing, and then you'd have this basically you versus your employer, and you'd say, oh no, I deserve that. After all, everybody else gets it. I should get it. I should get as good as anybody else. Food's every bit as important to me as anybody else, and it's very important to life. So, you shouldn't restrict food. And you would have this same system, the same dynamics in the food industry as you do in the healthcare industry today. And that's why healthcare is going through the roof. Well, the other thing that would happen, food stores would recognize that you didn't care about price. So guess what would happen? They would no longer put prices on items. And then guess what they would do with their prices? I know what I would do. I'm a business guy. I'd raise my prices. And that's the way the system works in healthcare. The consumer is not out there checking prices and making certain that prices don't go up or looking for the better bargain. And the result is we've almost had a quadrupling in real dollars the cost of health care. So we are at a tipping point. We're either going to go to a government-provided system with ration care and price fixing, and you'll have like they do in Canada, where if you want knee replacement, it'll take a year and a half. You'll have to wait for a year and a half to get the procedure. And by the way, Canadians come to the U.S. if they can afford to, because they can get the procedure immediately, and we have excellent care. Or we've got to go to the other way, where for people who can afford it, we've got to ask that they pay for their health care. They would have catastrophic coverage, but for everything that's not catastrophic, they would pay for it. And if you're paying for it, then all of a sudden you're going to start driving more economies in the system. That's what happens in LASIK surgery today. And LASIK surgery 15 years ago cost $2,500 an eye. Today it's less than $1,000 an eye, because people pay for it out of their own pocket. Doctors advertise, and you go to, you check just like you do when you're buying a computer or buying a service, any other service. You're a good consumer, and the result is it's become much more economical to consume. Had LASIK surgery been insured, third-party pay, it would have gone from $2,500 to probably $6,000 today over the last 15 years. But because it's not insured and people are paying for it out of their own pocket, we've driven down the cost. Trade, next big challenge. There's a huge anti-trade sentiment in America today. Huge. People think that trade is hurting us. We're losing jobs. It's bad for America. Well, here are the statistics. If we kept the same trading laws that we had right after World War II, our economy would be our U.S. incomes would be $1 trillion less, and average family or household income would be $9,000 less. So that's what freer trade has meant. And by the way, export jobs pay 15% more on average than other jobs in America. I'm going to show you this complicated slide. I couldn't resist it in just a moment, so I'm going to skip over this. It shows what trade is doing for the economy today, despite all those bad statistics that Ron referred to. Now, what would have happened if we eliminated all barriers to trade? Totally opened it up. The average family of four would gain $1,600 a year. The economy would expand by $95 billion, but 300 million people in the world would be pulled out of poverty. It would be remarkable. Now, does trade sometimes hurt people? Absolutely, it hurts people. There's certain categories of jobs that we lose those jobs, but then we gain other jobs. And so that's why we have what's called TAA, the Trade Adjustment Assistance Act, that helps people transition from the jobs they lost to new jobs. It actually pays for their health care, it pays for job training, it subsidizes their new jobs. And that's to enable everyone in America to benefit, but a few people are going to be hurt, and we need to help those people who are hurt, and that's appropriate. Now, here is this complicated slide. All y'all in economics, you ought to make a copy of this, because I love this slide. It tells you what the economy, this is last year, 2007, and what happened. And guess what the big negative is? Housing, referred to by Ron. Housing was off by 17% last year, and it cost the economy 1% in growth. But guess what offset it? Exports grew by 8%. So basically, contributed 0.9%, or almost 1%, to the 2.2% total growth. And as you can see, consumption really is what drives the economy. 71% of the economy is consumption. And we didn't have great consumption last year. It grew by 2%. And again, overall GDP growth was 2.2%. But it shows the importance of trade. And the good news is that as the economy has slowed down, exports have dramatically increased. Energy, another big challenge, as we all know. It's a challenge environmentally, it's a challenge economically, and it's a national security challenge. And that's the most important reason we should be concerned about energy. But in terms of the economy, of the $700 billion current account deficit we run, $300 billion, almost half of it, is energy. And this is interesting. 43% of the CO2 we produce, and I know y'all care about CO2 here, true, comes from oil, believe it or not. But the most important thing is we are funding our enemies, and this is important. Where do you think Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, where do you think their money comes from? It comes from us. We buy oil from Iran, from Saudi Arabia, from Venezuela, and that money is funneled to our enemies. Not all of it, but a little bit of it. They don't have to funnel a lot of it, and that's where their money comes from. I mean, you look at Hezbollah, Hamas, it goes from Iran to Syria and to those groups, unfortunately. So what do we do? Well, there have been two energy acts passed in the last, in 05 and December of 07. The one in 07 is going to require biofuels or some sort of alternative fuels of 36 billion gallons by 2022. To give you a sense, we use 140 billion gallons of gasoline a year right now. And it's going to increase the CAFE standards from 27 miles per gallon to 35. But the bottom line is, and this is important to understand, R&D is the ultimate solution here. And you got energy is divided up into two parts, basically, fuels and power. Fuels is the big problem in terms of international economics and national security. And I think by the mid-teens, we're going to have biofuels, that's cellulosic ethanol. That's ethanol that's made from plants, not corn, plants, weeds, switchgrass, any kind of cellulosic, wood chips. And we think by 2012, we'll be able to produce ethanol from plants at a competitive commercial price. But I really think what's going to happen is the lithium-ion battery. That's a battery that that's used every day in your cell phone, in your PC, and they're working very ambitiously to make a lithium-ion battery that works for your car. And Toyota thinks they'll have a plug-in battery, lithium-ion battery by 2010. I think by 2015 they'll probably have just batteries cars. And here's the most remarkable thing. Electric motors are 3 times more efficient than internal combustion engines. And electricity has half the cost of gasoline. So the cost of powering an electric vehicle is 1/6 the cost of powering an internal combustion engine. So it's going to be just like the HD TV. It's going to be, once we get there, it's going to dramatically hit us. And again, this is me. This is not, when I ask the scientists about it, they say, I don't know what's going to hit. That's why we need to be supporting everything. But I'm very optimistic about what's going to happen. And that's why it's so important that we invest in these technologies. And then on the power side, which is really important for really the CO2, there's geothermal, wind, solar, co-sequestration, nuclear. These are all very important to basically move into an environmentally benign power generation system. I happen to believe, I hope I'm not running out of time here, but I can't resist saying this. I think this is, before I die, now my mom's 95, so I'm going to live a while. It kind of bothers Katie. She said, Dad. But anyway, I think before I die, energy will be basically free and non-polluting. I know that's a shock, but I think that's what the ingenuity of the human mind will figure it out, just like we have in telecommunications. Think about it today. You guys, you students here don't appreciate this, but making a telephone call used to be the most expensive thing in the world. In 1935, it cost more to make a 3-minute call from London to New York than it did to take a steamer from London to New York. Today, it costs less than 20 cents to make a 3-minute call from London to New York. I think we're going to see that kind of dramatic technology hit in the energy sector, and and then we will all laugh about all these problems we've got now. But it's going to take the investment in R&D, which is very important for all of us to support. Immigration, huge issue, as we all know, political issue, but it's also a big economic issue. 5% of our workers are illegals. 5%, 7 million. If we sent them all back, it would have a devastating impact on the economy. Devastating impact on the economy. Now, there's the question is, do they hurt wages? And there are studies that say they do. They may hurt them as much as 4%. You have 4% lower wages. Other studies say these are for low income. Higher income people are all benefit from, not all, but as a group, benefit from low-skilled immigrants. But the question is, the low-skilled American workers, are they adversely affected? Some people say they are. Some people say they're actually helped. But the bottom line is, we can't, it's impossible to send these 5 million people back. It would be devastating to the economy. The mechanics just don't work. So we got to figure out some solution here. The other big issue that's equally as important in immigration is with the highly skilled. The growth, job growth, there's much more job growth among the highly skilled. For scientists, it's going to grow by 78% over the next 10 years. For computer engineers, about 38%. And guess what? I don't know how many of y'all are in science and engineering. I don't think y'all have an engineering school, but Americans are not getting educated in these. Enough Americans aren't getting educated in these fields. So the only thing we can do is bring in skilled people from overseas. But unfortunately, we're not doing it. This is the limit on skilled people coming in from overseas. It got as high as close to 200,000, but now Congress has cut it back to 65,000. That is not enough. Guess how long it takes each year for 65,000 applications to be made for the H-1B visa? It happens in day one. Day one. And I've talked to Bill Gates about this. I've talked to Craig Barrett's with Intel. I've talked to Sam Palmisano, whose, I think, son goes to school here. And I'll tell you what they tell you. If they can't get the people here, they're going to put their facilities over there. And they're already putting their facilities over there because they're having trouble getting people here. And all we're doing is cutting our nose off to spite our face by not letting these highly skilled people in. And they do not hurt, no one suggests they hurt anyone's wages. But this is a gigantic problem. Next big challenge, education. I think we all know it. It drives the economy, but it's becoming more and more and more important. In '79, a college degree was worth 45% more than a high school degree. In 2006, it's worth 75% more, and it's continuing to grow. And that's what causes our disparity in income. And the way to deal with our disparity of income is not to pull down the people who are skilled, but to pull up the people who are not skilled. And that's why we need to improve our education system. And finally, R&D investment. And this is important. When I was working in the White House, I dealt with Silicon Valley folks all the time. And I would ask them, I say, so how much technological innovation occurs in America? I'm sorry, I haven't been looking this way. And they would say, if you talk about generational leaps, technological innovation, what do y'all think? What percent occurs in the U.S.? Anybody want to guess? And these are guesses by these guys, but these guys are in the business. By the way, and many of them are from overseas, India and other places. somewhere between 70 and 90% of technological innovation occurs in the U.S., which is, in the world. Think about it. And then I would say, so why does it happen in the U.S.? I'd say it's the people, but most importantly, it's R&D investment, basic research, which we do at the federal level. And see, companies won't do it because basic R&D, the benefits of basic R&D are impossible for a single company to grab, and so they can't justify it. And that's why basic R&D is so important that we as taxpayers invest in it. And that's where you get all these spin-offs of new drugs, of new technologies, cellulosic, ethanol, lithium-ion battery technology, hydrogen, fuel cell, et cetera. And I'm happy to report that, in this administration, we've increased the R&D investment by about 35%. So, this is an area that's so important. And by the way, I assume y'all here at Middlebury get a big benefit from that. It's certainly true of higher ed all over the country. So many of our, this R&D money is awarded on a merit basis, and much of it goes to institutions of higher learning. So those are the 7 big challenges I think we're facing. I just got 2 other quick slides I'll show you because, how does the U.S. doing? Well, I just picked these out of the blue, these other 3 developed countries. And you can see we're doing fine. We sort of fell behind in the mid-'70s. And then starting in the early 80s, we've dramatically improved. And now, we've done better than anyone else over the last 45 years. You can ask me why I think what happened in 1980. And then our income, disposable income has tripled over the last 55 years. So, America's doing quite well. That's not to say we couldn't do better. I'm particularly frustrated that we don't deal with the big problems facing us, like entitlements. But others we are grappling with. We've got to grapple with immigration. And I'm happy to talk more about that, and I'm happy to talk more about any of this. So anyway, those are my thoughts in terms of the big challenges, and I'm now looking forward to y'all challenging me. I want to first direct, I'd like the questions to come from students out there, so tell me what's on your mind. I understand y'all are kind of liberal, so you're happy to, if you want to tell me how awful George Bush is and want me to defend him, I'm happy to do that. If you want to ask me why he's so stupid, I'm happy to answer that. If you want to ask me what's he really like, I'm happy to answer that. Yes, sir.
How can you ever really solve some of the entitlement problems while Medicare and some other things are basically pay-go programs that, as long as there's no money actually being saved, how are you ever going to?
Yeah, the government does not, this is a very important point. By the way, I know I signed this thing that y'all can use this, record this, but Congress is not honest in their accounting. And I'm happy for that to be public, wherever the nice lady was. They're not. They're absolutely not honest in their accounting. They would go to jail if they accounted for the way they account if they were in the private sector. They never save any money. And they say they put the Social Security in a trust fund, but they don't. They just spend it on other things. Whenever there's a surplus, it's spent somewhere else. They will never save. That is a given. So what you have to do is change the system so we don't spend it so quickly. And the only way to get us not to spend it so quickly, to be perfectly honest, with Medicare, is we've got a means test. It means that higher income people should, they should not get as good a benefit as lower income people. And then we've got to get everyone to have an incentive to be wise consumers. So you don't make stupid choices from an economic perspective. If you're going to be as well off at home as you are in a hospital, then you're at home. But the way it is now, you can just go into the hospital, and so it costs you the government $1,200 a day. So we've got to change the incentive system, and but Congress doesn't like to do that because people right now are getting it free. So how do you all of a sudden tell them they're not going to get it free? Yes, sir, in the back, yellow shirt.
Yeah,
or what color shirt? I can't tell.
You're talking about economics.
Yes, sir.
And poor decisions, but you didn't speak about the war in Iraq. So where does that play in terms of our need for research and development funding and curbing government spending? And has that just turned into an economic issue now?
Well, a lot of people like to claim it's an economic issue. That, you know, it's costing 120, 130 billion bucks a year. It's a lot of dough, and you know that's. I know Barack Obama believes that very strongly. You know, the president, on the other hand, thinks that you know this is a response to 9/11. This is a way to you know that we're in a giant war on terror against terrorists, and the front line of that right now is in Afghanistan and Iraq. And Al-Qaeda is very active in Iraq, and they are the primary source of the conflict right now. And the good news is we've made a lot of progress. I just talked to, there's a fellow over there, Captain Brian Dennison, and his dad and I grew up together in Jackson, Tennessee. And Brian wants to go to Vanderbilt Law School. He wants me to write him a letter of recommendation. So I called him the other day. He was in Iraq. It's his second tour. And he's in Ramadi. And he said, you know, when I arrived, it was us versus Al-Qaeda, and this is a Sunni area. And he said, you know, I said, well, who were the Sunnis for? And he said, they weren't for anybody. They were just keeping their heads down. But he said, over time, they have figured out that Al-Qaeda, you know, Al-Qaeda has really overplayed their hand and have you know, basically done things that have harmed the civilian population. And the Sunnis have figured out that the Americans are not interested in occupying their country. I'm just repeating what he said. And he said, as a result, the Sunnis started siding with the Americans, and Al-Qaeda has basically left the area. And he said, now I'm spending all my time trying to create a criminal justice system for this part of Iraq, a police force and a court system. And he said, the Iraqis have never had it, a criminal justice system, and it's been very hard. But this is why I decided now to go to law school rather than business school, because I find it fascinating. So, again, you can argue both sides of it. And you know, Barack Obama certainly eloquently presents his side. The president is doing it because he believes very strongly that this is to protect the American people. Yes, sir.
With the entitlements,
yes, sir.
And like the huge problems that they're going to present in the future, historically, politically in this country, has there been any situations where we've seen big problems coming and actually prevented them before they become the big problem, and then it's this emergency that we have to solve?
I don't, unfortunately. I mean, I'm sure there's some political scientists, professors around here who know all this, but nothing comes to mind. I mean, the '83 Greenspan Commission on Social Security, the reason it worked is we were literally out of money. We could not write the checks, so they had to solve the problem. And they didn't solve it. They kicked it down the road for about 25 years. And they knew, by the way, that it wasn't a solution. They knew it was just kicking the ball down the road for 25 years. But they dealt with it because they had to. And I spent all of '06, you know, the president was very much in favor of entitlement reform and dealing with it. I spent all of '06 on Social Security, on Capitol Hill, talking to Republicans and Democrats, trying to encourage them to, you know, come to the table to deal with it. And by the way, we could deal with Social Security very easily. That would be acceptable, I think. But Congress didn't see the need to do it. And since they didn't see the need to do it, they didn't do it. Yes, there's somebody over here I ought to get. Yes, sir, back there. Are any women going to ask questions? Yes, sir. Is there a woman that wants to ask? She'll be next. No, go ahead.
Well, okay, so you talked about outsourcing of jobs and production, and one of the reasons you gave for that was that the people coming in with visas was being limited. So, but if that weren't to happen, it doesn't seem like that would solve all of our outsourcing problems. So what else do you think we could do to work on that issue?
Well, I don't view outsourcing as a problem, to be honest. I mean, outsourcing is open trade and I think most studies would indicate that when jobs go overseas, the individuals who lost those jobs are hurt, but the population as a whole is helped. And that's why our incomes are $9,000 a year higher than they would have been had we not liberalized our trade laws. Again, there's no question individuals get hurt, but you know, I don't know if y'all, I'm not promoting United Airlines, but if you call United Airlines and finally get to an agent the agent's always in India, and because it's less expensive for them to do it. But that allows whoever would have done it in the U.S. to do something that's a higher value added where they will make more money. And generally, that's what happens. Now, there are a few people that are hurt, but most people end up making more money because we outsource the jobs. And, you can, so anyway, that's our theory. We had 8 people from Middlebury skiing at our place in Vail a couple of weeks ago, and we were so happy to have you there. So, where's the women? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this question is about immigration. Like you said, that 5% of our workforce is provided by illegal immigrants.
Right.
What do you think are any possible ways or solutions, economically speaking, to kind of not continue benefiting, but how to approach a situation of all the illegal immigrants coming, and how to, with visas, and how to deal with that situation?
Well, I mean, obviously everybody has their own theory, but I truly believe the only way we're going to eliminate illegal immigrants is it has to be done through employers. The only way we're going to prevent people from coming over here who are not legal is there cannot be jobs over here. If there are jobs over here where they earn 10 times more than they do in their home country, and these are people who are just like you and me. They care about their families. They care about putting food on the table. They care about paying for health care, paying for their housing. If they can increase their income by 10-fold by coming to the U.S., they're going to sneak over here. So we have to have a system that makes it where employers do not employ illegals. At the same time, though, we need a system that allows enough people to come over here to provide the number of employees that our employers need. If there are not enough people in the U.S., then we need to bring them in from overseas. And it's a very difficult issue, and it's very complicated. And unfortunately, there's a true negative feeling towards immigrants in America, even though we're all immigrants. And I love the story of America, and the story of, all of us came, virtually all of us, maybe there's some Native Americans here, but came from overseas at some time in our background. And many of us were first generation. And by the way, and these, you just look at the incredible success of people who came from overseas. So, anyway, that's the only way we can deal with it, I think. Yes, ma'am.
Just reflecting on the importance you put on trade, shouldn't that hypothetically mean that we shouldn't support sanctions in any way, like be it against Cuba or Iran, and instead should want to engage with them?
That is a very good question. That is a very good question. The Bush administration, I don't work for the Bush administration, but the Bush administration feels very strongly about that, and for national security reasons. But I think it's a very good point to make that sanctions are not ever successful. And on a limited time basis they can be. Like with Iran, there are certain financial sanctions that are in place right now that's been in the newspaper that are having an impact. And hopefully the result is that it puts pressure on the local population, the Iranian population puts pressure on the Iranian government to basically be better world citizens. But in terms of Cuba, I think there are very good arguments that the current sanctions don't make sense. But I can tell you politically they do make sense because the Cuban Americans in Florida feel very, very strongly about it. Yes, sir.
What do you think should be done, if anything, about increasing the low rate of savings among American families?
The low rate of savings? Yeah, that's a very good question. The way I'm sure there's some economists here. The way we define savings is odd, but the way we define it, we actually have a negative savings rate, or basically a zero savings rate. We don't count appreciation in housing, appreciation in securities, or stocks and bonds and that sort of thing. But we do have a low savings rate. We invest about 18% of our GDP, and we save about 12% of our GDP. So that difference That's a shortfall of 6% of GDP, and we have to pull that money in from overseas, and that's why we have a big current account deficit. There are arguments, pro and con on this, but we are a consumption-oriented society. We are an incredibly fertile place to invest, and that's why people from overseas like to invest here. But most economists would agree that it would be helpful if, over time, our savings rate increased. In China, for example, the savings rate is 50%. Think about that, 50%. And that's why they have all this surplus currency that they then invest in other countries. But their population is harmed by that because, they're not enjoying the benefits of their work. I mean, all their money is being saved as opposed to going for better housing, or better housing would be considered, but, better food or better services or better clothing or better whatever. And so, I think, what hopefully is going to happen, that the Chinese, as an example, become more, don't save quite as much and we save more. And because there's always going to be an equilibrium. They will all, this is one of those zero-sum games. If we save less, somebody else has to save more, and in the end, if you add it all up, it'll be zero. So, but it's most economists would say it's a significant problem, and over time we ought to save more. Yes, sir.
Do you see the depreciating U.S. dollar to be a risk to the future growth in the U.S. economy?
Well, I think most people would argue it would cut the other way. But, I can tell you, when I was a member of the Bush administration, our policy was only two people talk about the dollar. That's the Secretary of the Treasury and the President. So I don't want to, since I've only been gone 6 weeks or something, I don't want to get into it other than to say most people, or a lot of economists would say, as the dollar depreciates, that makes our goods less expensive to the rest of the world, and that increases exports. So it will actually have a positive impact. And it makes goods overseas more expensive, so therefore we will buy less from overseas, should increase our savings rate, et cetera. But there are also arguments on the opposite side. It's, the economist always has to have two hands, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So, but it's a very good question. Yes, sir.
I didn't hear you talk about this when you were talking about healthcare. What's your thoughts or positions on the privatization of public goods and services like education, healthcare, housing, and what have kind of the administration's thoughts or actions been in that regard?
Well,
would you like to see more things like that privatized? And do you have a sense that that sort of like neoliberalist approach to things will help our situation?
Yeah, I think we should privatize as much as we possibly can, because the great thing about having the private sector do it, here's an example. It's kind of maybe in the weeds, but TSA, that stands, the people at the airports, I forget what that stands for, but those are government workers, and a lot of people in Congress wanted it to be government workers. Well, I think we'd have been so much better off to have it as private sector workers, because here's the big advantage of having private sector workers. You can measure their performance, and you can fire them and get another private sector entity to do it for you. Where when you've got government workers, it's much more difficult, and it's much more difficult to measure and incentivize, et cetera. And with education, I'm a big believer that, we would be much better off to give everyone a voucher and have competition out there and let everyone from all walks of life choose where he or she goes to school, as opposed to forcing people to go to whatever schools in there, wherever they live. And what happens is, in the inner city, where the less successful schools tend to be, and the people who are the most in need of good education, they're forced to go to the less successful schools. And, I don't think that makes sense. I think we'd be much better off to have a competitive marketplace. Let's see here. Yes, sir.
I recently registered to vote, and will be voting in my first presidential election this November, and I'm really concerned about the economy. In your opinion, strictly in terms of economic policy, regardless of political parties, et cetera, who do you think, which candidate at this point do you think would have the best program for America at this point?
Well, I'm a big believer in, I would pick the person who's going to have the smallest government and the lowest taxes if you want to have the strongest economy. And I think that's John McCain, but assuming it's McCain versus Obama. But anyway, I mean, I've actually worked with Barack Obama, and I always found him, well, one, he's incredibly smart. He's incredibly good guy. He's just a nice person, and I think that comes across. And, you know, he certainly understands the issues and understands the Republican perspective, the Democrat perspective, and I think in the primary he's been more liberal than hopefully if he gets the nomination he will be in the general, and also if he wins then he would govern. And when I say liberal, I'm worried about all these new government programs and new taxes and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, if you go back to what I think happened here, we had big tax cuts, huge tax cuts. When Reagan entered office, the marginal tax rate on unearned income was 70%. 70%. 70 cents out of every dollar was taken in taxes on unearned income. 50 cents of every dollar was taken in taxes of earned income. When he left office, here, it was down at 28 cents. And I think, you know, most economists would say, if you earn more, then you're going to work harder. And I think that's why we've you know, done so much better since 1980. But that's my theory, and I know most of y'all are Democrats and probably feel differently. But yes, sir.
How would we put the IRS out of business?
And do what? Have a sales tax, a fair tax?
Fair tax or consumption tax?
Consumption tax. That's what Mike Huckabee's run on. Let me tell you the problem with it. By the way, from an economist perspective, if you could have a fair tax and you didn't take any more revenue, it would be the best tax you could have. But politically, I don't think it ever works because, you know, you can try to design it where it's not regressive, but the bottom line is the lower income people spend a much higher percentage of their income, so they're going to pay a higher tax rate, and the higher income save more, so they're going to pay a lower tax rate in terms of taxes on their overall income. But, you know, in a perfect world, we wouldn't tax savings. And that's essentially what you're suggesting. And we would then deal with this. It would certainly help the savings problem in America. But I can't see it ever working politically. But it's an excellent question.
How do you think we should deal with the budget deficit?
The budget deficit. If you want my honest answer, first off, I've got an interesting slide that will shock y'all. This will absolutely. I brought some extra slides just in case you wanted to. See, here's defense. I'm going to go through, but we're going to get to yours. But isn't it interesting how defense has dropped so dramatically? This is as a percent of GDP. And this is growth in mandatory spending. You can see how it just overwhelms the actual total revenues. Again, look at entitlements. It used to be 26%. Now it's 53%. It's over half the budget entitlements. All right, this is the declining federal debt. This is the one I wanted to get to. What's interesting is that the federal debt as a percentage of GDP is actually declining. Well, it's slightly went up here, but the bottom line is it hadn't dramatically increased under President Bush. And by the way, I think we should have spent less, and I'm confident he feels that way. But the reason is because you can have a deficit of about 2% of GDP, and because of the growing economy, your overall debt as a percent of GDP is not increasing. And I can tell you what happens whenever you get to a balanced budget or a surplus. Here's what happens. They spend it. They spend it. Congress, people in Congress, spend money as if no one has to pay for it. And it really becomes easy for them to spend it if there's a surplus. And so I think we want to keep their feet to the fire. And the last thing in the world we want to do is to raise taxes to cut a budget deficit. We want to reduce spending to cut a budget deficit. The only way to do that is to keep the pressure on it. Yes, sir.
Of the two problems of entitlements and energy, which do you foresee being adequately dealt with?
What's going to be adequately dealt with?
First, yeah, soon.
Of the ones I listed? Oh my goodness, let's see. Let's go all the way back here. I don't think entitlements are going to be dealt with very soon at all. I think there's a very if healthcare, I mean, I think something's going to give in the next 4 to 8 years on healthcare. Could give in 2009 based on the presidential campaign. I hope both sides run on clear agendas, and then when they get elected, they'll have a mandate to do it. Now, obviously, I think my own bias that McCain's approach would be much better than the Obama's approach or Hillary's approach. I'm worried about trade. I mean, I think energy, we're going to keep putting the dollars into R&D. I think that's going to be fixed. I really do. It's going to take time because you got to wait on R&D. Immigration has, oh my God, I mean, we got to deal with it. I mean, we just have to deal with it. And I think it's going to have to be dealt with in the next 4 years. And I think either McCain or Obama or Hillary would deal with it. Education, listen to this statistic. The last 25 years, in today's dollars, we spend 78% more on K through 12 education than we did 25 years ago. And the test scores are not any better. I mean, we have not figured out K through 12 education. And it's a crying shame. And I hope we keep investing in R&D. Yes, sir. We get a professor here. Oh, my God! What do you teach, sir?
I'm one of the chaplains.
Oh, my God, no. Yes, I sinned yesterday. I raised my voice to my wife, and I do apologize.
Come visit me. I'll be doors open.
Okay.
What's the tipping point in your mind between globalization and open market forces and sovereignty, national sovereignty? At what point do we have a corporate-run world replacing internationalization?
Oh my goodness, that's a very good question, particularly for a chaplain. You have to be well educated to be a chaplain at Middlebury. I don't know whether are you referring to the sovereign wealth funds and all of that, or
at what point aren't nations calling their own shots anymore? At what point are corporations deciding foreign policy and priorities?
I really don't see that. For example, all I know is from the U.S. perspective, but when I look at other, I'm sorry I'm stuttering, but I'll give you an example. I'd be interested to know what your reaction is to this, but President Bush, the first time he met with President Hu from China, he said to the president shared this little story with me. He said to President Hu, in my mind, President Hu, I don't know what he calls him, but I don't know what his first. It's hard to figure out what the first name is of a Chinese person, but anyway, President Hu Jin. But anyway, President Hu, Iran is what I consider the biggest challenge I've got, and I'd be interested to know from the Chinese perspective, what's the biggest challenge? And his answer was creating 20 to 25 million new jobs every year, which I thought was very interesting. The Chinese, they are and I'm sure there are China experts here who know a lot more about it than I do. But what I was amazed by in dealing with the Chinese is that they, obviously it's it's not a democracy, but they operate in a lot of ways like a democracy because they are very concerned about how the people of China feel about the government, and they are therefore responsive. They are very concerned about rural China and the fact that the rural Chinese earn a lot less than the urban Chinese, and that's why they want to create this 20 to 25 million new jobs a year. Now, in our own situation, we have, the government decides whether we can export certain things because of technology. We decide whether foreign companies can acquire certain companies in the U.S. because of technology and national security reasons. And I guess I think in the end, at least the U.S. government, my sense is most responsive to the American people, not to corporate America. By the way, and at the same time, I will say this, special interests drive me crazy, absolutely crazy. And the problem is the government is too important to these industries and individual corporations, so they, through donations, et cetera, so I guess I'm now going on the other side of this, but they will, through donations, et cetera, get enormous power and basically put pressure on decision-making that does not make the most sense for. So, yes, it does happen, and it's a problem. And I don't know how to deal with it other than to be totally transparent so the American people understand when, that these special interest groups are giving lots of dollars and using lots of influence to try to influence government decisions. I mean, an example is farm subsidies. I mean, why should we, it was supposed to be temporary in the 1930s, and here it is 80 years later, and we're still subsidizing farmers. And by the way, farm incomes and farm prices are at record levels, and yet, they still insist on subsidies. And I'm sure there are other examples. It's 5:30, so I'm supposed to quit, am I not? Is that right? Should I have one more question? Who's got the most brilliant question in the room? Come on. Who's got it? The chaplain had the most difficult question I've had so far. I'm glad it wasn't about the Bible, or I would have, I need to do some more study. There, the most brilliant question.
Well, you talk about that the subprime mortgage crisis and the credit crisis is just a temporary problem that will be solved in like 2 years or something. Do you consider like the economic plan that was considered like a month ago by Congress and Bush the waste of money?
You mean the budget?
Yeah, the economic impulse plan.
Pardon me?
The economic impulse plan, like giving every family more money.
The stimulus plan?
Yeah, stimulus plan.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, we've got a slowdown in this economy. There's no question about it. And obviously, everyone's hurt by a recession, and Congress and the President came together and put together the stimulus plan. It's cost about $150 billion. And, I think it's important. And I know I was talking to a member of the Federal Reserve a couple of days ago, and, they think by third quarter it will have an impact. And I think it's very important that it will counteract the slowdown in the economy, and it'll do it through encouraging more business investment, which is essentially savings, and also distributing money to people and they will spend it. So no, I think it was a good. It's not. There's no perfect answer, and economies. We're going to always have. We're not going to always have expanding economies. We'll never solve that. There'll always be. People will be overly exuberant. People will overlend. People will overspend. People will not save enough, and so it's never going to be perfect. But I think that it was an appropriate response. It wasn't, from my perspective, the perfect bill, but it was a good bill. So, well, listen, I'm honored that y'all have spent an hour with me. I hope you found it somewhat interesting. I appreciate the fact you've got so much interest in economics. And let me just tell you, the fact that you're at Middlebury tells a lot about you and what a success you've been through high school. And I know you're continuing to be a success here at Middlebury. And what a great institution. And my wife, Kathy, and I feel very fortunate that Katie's here and we get to come visit with all of you. So let's all have a great winter carnival weekend. And thank you very much.
Thank you.